Everybody, what is going on? It is Sunday, September 25th, 2022, and this is a special live stream slash review, however you want to put it. As you know, I usually only go live on Fridays at this particular time, but I'm going live today because I'm doing a review of the limited series on Netflix called Dahmer Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story. As you are all coming in here, please be sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you are new, hit that like button for sure. Hit the share button if you haven't done so already. I would definitely greatly appreciate it. I'm actually multi-streaming. I'm streaming on YouTube as well as on Twitter. So if you can't watch it on one, you can catch it on the other. So start coming on in, and we'll handle this just like we do every other stream, but it's just a little bit different because I'm doing a live review of, I guess you could say, a mini series, limited series, movie, however you want to put it. Just waiting for some more people to come on in. No one has written anything in the chat as of yet. Even on Restream, it says there's 15 people in here. Okay, now some people starting to come in. Jib Star said this series gave me the chills. David Robinson, was he the guy who, I'm not going to say it on here, but yes, to answer your question, and a whole lot more. It's way more to it, but we're going to discuss it today. Yolanda, good evening. Black TS4 brother, what's going on with you? Just waiting for some more people to come on in because we're going to be here for a while because I'm going to really go through every episode. I'm not going to say with a fine-tooth comb, but based off of remembrance. I actually just finished watching it a couple days ago. It took me 2 days to get through it. Brenda Hill said 30 minutes of it was gory. It's a hard watch. I will admit that, but we'll talk about it as we go through. Let's just put it this way. I'm watching this so you don't have to, for those of you who couldn't get through it or for those of you who refuse to watch it. He said, bro, he played the hell out of the role. He did. He really did. I can see him possibly getting nominated for some awards for that role. Even though I would prefer that role not to be glamorized in that way because of what happened, but we're going to get into all of that. Tia to you says, blessings, rain, reloaded kinfolk. James says, salute to you, a salute to you. CW 5001, excuse me. He said, well, I would be watching tonight. B1 Afro Elite. Yolanda said, I've seen many different movies and documentaries on him over the years. They are all creepy, and I have not seen this one yet. Oh, you said Niecy. Oh, Niecy Nash. Yeah, she did do a good job with her role, with her part. Still Rain, what's going on? He said, yeah, I was in high school when these events took place, and when I was in the army, I knew a person that lived in the same complex with Jeffrey Dahmer. Did they tell you how that experience was? The 8 of it says, I dropped Netflix, but I'm interested in what the family thinks of it. Well, you've come to the right place because I'm going to talk about it today. Like I said, it was 10 episodes, and I'm going to go through what happened in all 10. As a matter of fact, I have it right here on my phone, so I can have a synopsis, so I can remember what happened in each episode, because I didn't take any notes when I was watching this. So I'm going off of memory and off of the synopsis to help guide me through this discussion. PD Chicago says, I gotta watch My Best Friend Dahmer starring Jeremy Renner. B1 fam. What's up, Dewani? Miss Renee. Nate Blast 90 said, I like the part where you got deleted. You deleted. Well, you and everybody else, but we're not going to jump the gun. We're going to work our way to that part. We all know that's the part that I think any Black person who was watching this movie probably liked the most, or anybody who just didn't care for Jeffrey Dahmer. I think that's the part where everybody was loving the most, but I think Black people loved it the most because of who did it. Delightful says, oh my, I couldn't finish it. No way. That's the common the common sense that I'm getting with a lot of people, is that those who started to watch it said they couldn't finish it because of how gruesome it is. And it starts off heavy, but like I said, we're going to get into that as I get into this discussion. Stay positive. He said, B1, sir, in chat. B1 to you. Black TS4 brother said it makes you angry. It definitely will. This is no movie this is no series that's going to make you smile in any, well, except at the end. It probably will. James Hudson said Niecy Nash was amazing as the neighbor. Yes, she did do a good job. She really did a good job in her portrayal as the neighbor. D Hustle 909 says B1 brothers and sisters. Matthew said my wife and I are watching this right now on episode 8 currently. So you're pretty far ahead. You're almost at the end. The 8 of it says, wow, 10 episodes. It says Dub S much really want to push this. I bet they are attempting to normalize. Hold on, these comments are going so fast. Or normalize his behavior. I'm actually going to talk about that because there's actually something in this series that actually shows that happening. Steel Rain said that neighborhood that Jeffrey Dahmer lived in was a lot like my old neighborhood, predominantly black, but we did have a significant amount of Southeast Asians. Black TS4 bus says one of my favorites when he see. Hold on. I'm not gonna read any like any of the comments yet because I don't want to get ahead of myself for those of you who have not seen it, but just want to see what my take is on it. And shout out to the first super chat. It said, congrats on 50K. I went to Marquette Law School. The school bought that apartment building. Okay, well, appreciate the dono and the little tidbit, Andrew, for that. I'm gonna give it about 3 more minutes and then we're going to go ahead and get into it. Uchina is just like it's a Friday live stream. It's just like it's a different setup. And as y'all know, usually when I do reviews of movies or whatever, it's pre-recorded, but because this was a 10 episode limited series, it's no way I was gonna get all my thought out in a pre-recorded video because it's a lot. It's a whole lot. For those who have watched it, for even those who have not watched it, y'all are in for something serious. I will tell you that. It's 6:08. Get about 2 more minutes, and then we are going to go ahead and get started. Yeah, what Freedom Queen 00 said, hit the like button. Please hit that like button. As a matter of fact, hitting the like button should be the first thing you do before you even leave a comment in this chat. Black TS4 brother said I finished in 2 settings. That's the same with me. I watched the first 5 episodes on Friday and then watched the other 5 yesterday. No, I watched the first 5 Thursday and then watched the second 5, the other half, Friday. I would have done this yesterday, but yesterday I had to go to a wedding renewal for my cousin. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, so probably saw the videos and the pictures from that. So that's why I couldn't come on here yesterday and do it. Otherwise, I would have did it yesterday. But nonetheless, because it's still a new series because it came out on the 21st, I believe it was. Hacksign said, cool cut. Actually, Hacksign, you can't see it, but it's not a cut. I actually got my head in cornrows. As you can see right here. That's what I got. I don't know how you missed it because you can kind of see the hair right here on the side, right here. P. Chicago said, congratulations. Thank you. It was a very joyous occasion. Had a lot of fun yesterday. Especially when you're around family like that. It's always refreshing sometimes, to just do something and be somewhere positive in a positive setting. Thank you, Yolanda, for the compliment. I definitely appreciate it. All right, it is 6:10. It is time to get into this review because, like I told y'all, it is 10 episodes. I don't know how many of y'all are still going to be here by the time I get to the end, but we got a lot to talk about when it comes to this series. Okay, so Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story is a limited series that is currently on Netflix. It came out September 21st, 2022. All 10 episodes are on Netflix right now. If you do choose to want to go and watch it or have watched it, is on there. I know that Ryan Murphy, who is behind projects like American Horror Story, The People versus OJ Simpson. I think the Monica Lewinsky one, I think he did that too. He is like the showrunner for this series. And when you look at the directing style of the episodes, or at least the ones he directed, you can kind of see his footprint, or his handprint, I should say, on this particular series. But the show has like two main characters of the series. Of course, the one who plays Jeffrey Dahmer, whose name is Evan Peters. Some of y'all may know him as Quicksilver from the second round of X-Men films. And he was also he did a couple of episodes of WandaVision. He also was in a couple of seasons of American Horror Story as well. So him and Ryan Murphy have a working relationship. And I think that was excellent casting on his part, because he looked and acted just like Jeffrey Dahmer. And that's scary enough as it is, considering how creepy Jeffrey Dahmer was in real life. Then the other main character that you kind of had was Niecy Nash's character, who she played Glenda Cleveland, who was the next door neighbor to Jeffrey Dahmer. And she was a real person as well. Some people online, I don't know why they didn't do their research and thought that she was just like an inserted character into the story that didn't exist. But no, Glenda Cleveland is an actual person that lived right next door to Jeffrey Dahmer. And she plays a huge part of this story. The show, or the series, started heavy, like right out the gate. Like they literally, and somebody blocked 69mega.com. That's one of those, I guess, one of those troll porno whatever. Can someone block them? I would greatly appreciate that. Any of my mods in here, I know I have some in here. Can y'all block them? And please be on alert, because they're probably going to try it tonight or this evening in this chat. So, like I said, this story is pretty much about Jeffrey Dahmer. It starts off in that current time, and then it does some flashbacks here and there. So let's just jump right on into it. And we're going to talk about episode 1. And the first episode 1 is actually titled just episode 1. It doesn't have a title, it just says episode 1. The synopsis for episode 1 is: after throwing his neighbor off the stench, and his neighbor will be Glenda Cleveland, played by Niecy Nash. It says, coming from his apartment, Jeff heads to a local bar where a stranger takes him up on a tempting offer. So basically, how this all starts, it starts off in 1991. And, by this time, Jeffrey Dahmer has already massacred like 15 men already. By this time, he's already deleted about 15 men, one boy. And we're going to get into that because that's actually episode 2. He's already massacred 15 males by this time, and he's working on his 16th. Now, the way it's set up is Jeffrey Dahmer lives in a predominantly black area. The building that he lives in has predominantly black tenants. He's like one of the only PC men that lives there. And the bar that he goes to is like right down the street. So he doesn't have to drive far. He can just walk there. He walks right there, and that's where he scopes out, a potential victim or someone he seeks. Now, the common theme, as many of us have already who know the story, is that vast majority of his victims were black men in the academy. Now, he did have some PC men, and he had one Asian boy. But and I think he had maybe a Puerto Rican guy or Hispanic man in there too. But the vast majority of his victims were black men. And like Black TS4 Brother said in the chat, not all of his victims were in the academy, which leads us to this one right here, whose name was Tracy Edwards. Tracy Edwards just happened to be at that particular bar. But Tracy Edwards I actually had a chance to watch his testimony, his real life testimony against Jeffrey Dahmer on the stand a couple days ago, because they put it up on one of those true crime channels. And he actually said that when they asked him, he said, "You're not a homosexual man." He says, "No, I'm a heterosexual man." So what Black TS4 said in the chat, not every man that he took out was who lived that lifestyle, but a lot of them were. And so he goes out to this bar. He's seeking out his next victim, and he sees a couple of guys, and Tracy Edwards happens to be one of the guys. So he just basically says things to him. And the way Jeffrey Dahmer talked, it was like almost in a slothy kind of way. In case y'all didn't know, Jeffrey Dahmer was a heavy drinker and a heavy smoker. If you watch this series, you're going to see that a lot. On Court TV. Thanks, James. It was on Court TV. And almost every scene that Jeffrey Dahmer has, well, the character, he always had a 6-pack, some kind of a beer, maybe a Budweiser, and a pack of cigarettes. He was always smoking. He was always drinking. He had a heavy alcohol and nicotine problem. Like that's just how he was. And that's a common theme with him through all of it. He was a heavy smoker and a heavy drinker. So his common thing was to get the men to the apartment is he would drug them. He would take these crushed up pills, crush them up, and put it into the drink and mix it up to get the victim to be more relaxed, or in a sense where they cannot run or be outside of their body or not have the strength to even fight back. So to fast forward a little bit, Tracy goes back to Jeffrey's apartment with him under false pretenses because Tracy thinks he's going there for something else. Jeffrey knows why he's taking him back there. He says, "We're just going to watch a movie," and all. That's the kind of thing that he did with a lot of his videos. We're just going to watch a movie. We're just going to chill. He tried to do the whole Netflix and chill thing before Netflix was a thing. Before Netflix and chill was a thing. And ironically, this series is on Netflix. So he takes him back to the apartment, and then they're in the room, they're watching the TV, and then all of a sudden Tracy starts to kind of feel out of himself a little bit because Jeffrey put the drugs in his drink. Of course, he didn't know because it was mixed around and it was a dark drink, so you couldn't see it. Then all of a sudden they're in the room, and then it gets a little hectic, and Jeffrey starts saying, "I want to take pictures of you," and everything. And then what happens is Tracy just kind of plays along because it's like he knows he doesn't live that lifestyle, but he knows Jeffrey does. He said, "Okay, if I'm going to get out of here alive, I need to play the long game in order to get out of here." Now, the way that Jeffrey had locks on his door set up, he had like a special lock on the key lock. Well, not the key lock, but the lock that you turn. And he had it strategically set up that way just in case someone tried to leave. And if they thought they was going to get out, they weren't going to get out. So he was taking pictures of Tracy in these positions. Tracy started taking his clothes off. He started dancing, like almost like he was giving a strip tease, playing on his mental. Then they go into the room. Then Jeffrey lays him back on the bed, and it's a blood spot. It's a blood stain on the mattress. We don't know from where that's from, but we know it's from one of his victims. And then all of a sudden, Jeffrey lays his head on Tracy's chest because his shirt is off at this time. And he said, "I can hear your heartbeat." And he says, "I like the way your heart sounds, and I can't wait to eat it." That's what he said. In case y'all didn't know, Jeffrey Dahmer was known to eat the organs of some of his victims, including the heart. He said, "I like the way your heartbeat sounds. I can't wait to eat it." And Tracy's face is like, "Oh yeah, I got to find a way to get out of here." And there's all this time the TV is on. There's a big knife on the stand, and they pan the camera over, and there's a dead black body on the floor. All this person has on is some black underwear, but we don't know who that person is yet. We don't know who that person is. It's just a body that's laid there on the floor. So fast forward a little bit more. Tracy does something, and he kind of pretends like he's out of it, but he's kind of like his senses are starting to come back up. He ends up fighting off Jeffrey to get out of the apartment. Then Jeffrey pulls him back, and they tussle a little bit more. Tracy breaks free. He opens up the door and he's running down the hallway saying, help me, this guy's trying to kill me. And then the neighbor, Glenda Cleveland, played by Niecy Nash, opens up the door, and you see Jeffrey crawling out the door because he's still hurt from when Tracy, like, I think he kneed him in the balls or something like that. And we know any guy that gets hit there, that's it. And then she quickly closes the door frantically, and all you see is Tracy running down the street with just his pants on and no shirt, running like sprinting like a track star down the street at night, yelling, help me. Then he runs into these cops, and I'm sitting here saying to myself, oh God, they probably gonna think he's crazy, and they're gonna take him back. And sure enough, they took him back. Now, mind you, Tracy had the handcuff attached to him because Jeffrey was going to handcuff himself to him. Luckily, he didn't do that, but he had the handcuff on his wrist. So they took Tracy back to the apartment, and the police knock on the door and tell him to open up the door and whatnot. Now, mind you, the apartment stinks. That's one thing I forgot to tell you. The apartment smells. And every time they brought up the stench of the apartment to Jeffrey, he always said, oh, it was some meat that went bad. It was the fish because he had a fish tank. He came up with different things every time to say why the apartment smelled, besides what we knew what it was to be. Now, mind you, Jeffrey just killed somebody before he brought Tracy over because there was a drill there and there was blood literally dripping off of the drill. So he just took somebody out right before bringing another person in, like literally within the same night. He wasted no time. If he wanted, it became a routine thing for him. It became ramped up. So they get back to the apartment. Tracy's waiting outside. The police go in, and the cops are looking like, what is that smell and everything like that. And he was like, oh, it was nothing. He was making up a lie. The cops start looking around. They find some pictures. They look up and they see the pictures, and they see that the pictures are very gruesome because these are pictures that he took of his victims while they were dead. And then they said, okay, these are definitely real. This is not fake. So Jeffrey tries to leave. He tries to run out of the apartment. Cops grab him. Then they arrest him. They put the cuffs on him. They walk him out of the apartment, and then they take him out. And then you hear Glenda Cleveland saying, I called y'all so many times. I called y'all like 50 plus times. Y'all never responded back. Y'all never came back. Y'all kept giving me the runaround, all this, that, and the third. But that's going to play into a bigger story later on into, excuse me, the review. So this is the time where in the series where they finally arrest Jeffrey Dahmer. They book him, they get his fingerprints, and they start questioning him and interrogating him and all types of stuff. And it's at this point they show what is to come later on in the series in the very first episode. So at this point, Jeffrey is in jail. He's locked. He's in the I think maybe the county jail, right there, locked up. This is right before his trial. He's locked up, and that's pretty much how the first episode ends. So let me see what y'all saying in the chat. I know that was a lot in the first episode right there. We got 9 more to go. Stay tuned. And if y'all haven't hit that like button already, be sure to go ahead and do that. Nate Blast says, and the pigs wonder why they get hated. King SB said they kept releasing him to kill some more. That's actually going to segue a little bit into the second episode. Black TS4 said, and then those pigs asked Tracy to come in with them. King SB said the nosy neighbor tried to save him. Jonathan said, my gosh. Miss Renee said Jeffrey was very evil. Oh, probably one of the worst. Probably one of the worst. He was bold. Yeah, he really was. And I said to myself, imagine if Jeffrey Dahmer was able to do that with the technology we have today. You know, with like these dating apps and stuff like that. He did all this on foot back in the 80s and 90s. He did all this on foot. Like he would walk and scope these people out. So just imagine if this was now today, how much more successful he would have been. I mean, he was successful in the right that he was able to take out like 16 males. Jay the informant said, wondering if everyone moved out the next day. It's funny you mentioned that because that's actually something that's talked about in one of the later episodes. All right. Now that was episode 1. Now we're going to move on to episode 2. The synopsis for episode 2 is, well, the title is called Please Don't Go. And the synopsis of episode 2 is, a young Jeff contends with troubles at home and school. Years later, his strange behavior evolves into murderous deeds that slip past the police. So this episode right here, we take this is our first flashback. We take a flashback back to the 60s where Jeff was like 6 years old. Now, Jeff's home life was very tumultuous. His mother, if for those of you who didn't watch it, his mother probably could have won an award for worst mother ever. Like, this woman was a piece of work as well as a POS. I mean, the way she would talk to him, the way she would talk to his dad, which was her husband, she was not really a mother at all. This woman, keep in mind, was taking and popping all types of pills and drinking while she was pregnant with him. And she kept saying, because back then you didn't know what kind of diagnosis you could get. They'll say one thing and they'll give you something, but she was taking all types of stuff that she shouldn't have been taking while she was pregnant. I mean, like, you name it, she took it. Like, she was off the chain. And then it talked about, his school life. You could tell he was a bit of a loner. Like, it starts off where he's in the back of the bus by himself. He's not talking to anybody. He doesn't really have any friends. What I knew something was wrong with him was when, in the scene where he went to school and the kids brought in apples. Kids tend to bring, back then would bring their teacher apples. You had one kid bought an apple, then another kid bought an apple. What did Jeffrey bring his teacher? A mason jar filled with tadpoles. Now, if that doesn't tell you right then and there that something is off, I don't know what will. You brought your teacher a creature that's going to eventually turn into a frog or frogs. He brought his teacher a mason jar filled with tadpoles and water. Now, here's where it gets even more crazier. He one of the kids in the classroom was basically questioning the teacher, like, why is he so weird? And, all types of things like that. She said, don't call him weird. Maybe he just needs some friends to talk to him. And he was looking at the tadpoles, and she basically let the kid take the tadpoles out of the classroom. Jeffrey saw that this boy was holding the mason jar full of tadpoles, and he just basically snapped on the boy. He didn't hit him or anything. Like, he just yelled at him. And then the boy walked home with the tadpoles in his hand and went in his house. Now, back in the day, people could leave their doors unlocked and it was nothing. Jeffrey followed this boy to his home, walked into his house, took the mason jar back out of the house that had the tadpoles in them, went home, got some motor oil, and poured the motor oil into the mason jar with the tadpoles, shook it up, and killed them. Now, they always say that the signs of a person that's probably off their rocker, and if you don't get a hold of it, they're going to grow up and probably become what he did, is when they're out there killing animals. He poured motor oil into the mason jar of tadpoles, shook it up, and killed them. That's I guess you can say that was his first kill, quote unquote. That was his first deletion, was a mason jar full of tadpoles with motor oil. And then it just kind of dives into, like Nate Blast said, killing animals are one sign of a serial killer. And what did he end up becoming? So then it starts to dive in a little bit more to his childhood, a little bit more. He starts to show interest in, like, the dissecting of animals and things of that nature. And it's stuff that his dad would show him how to do, because Jeffrey didn't really have interest in a lot of different things, but he found interest in, like, exploring the anatomy of animals. So he and his dad would drive around finding random roadkill to go pick up and just examine the organs or the insides of these animals that they would find dead on the side of the road. And or maybe things they would find under the house, because they used to have all kinds of dead carcasses under the house. I think one time they said they found a possum under the house. They would pull it out, examine it, check it, and all types of stuff like that. But I guess that was a bonding thing that him and his dad had. Like I said, his dad was more in his life than his mom was. Like someone said his mom was nuttier than fruitcake, and she was. If you watched the movie or haven't watched it, she was off the chain for every moment that she had in this movie, even when she was pregnant with him. But I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later because that's another episode. Miss Renee said his dad was weird too. I would say this, his dad, yeah, to show him how to do that, yeah, he was weird in that aspect. But you can tell his dad actually tried. His mother didn't. His mother like really wanted nothing to do with him. I'm almost shocked that she didn't try to give herself an abortion, honestly, with how she was carrying on. But yeah, he would show him how to, like I said, to dissect and cut open and look and examine the insides of roadkill and dead animals. So that's really where it started for Jeff, as far as him wanting to examine the insides of these animals. And of course, you know what it ended up segueing into. Mimi said the dad was a nut too. He was just more reserved than the mother. I guess you can say, yeah, you could say that. So we have two people in here that said the dad was weird, but yeah, like Mimi said, he was just more reserved. He wasn't out there like the mother was. I mean, the mother was like constantly cussing, yelling. I think she even tried to attack the dad with a weapon and all types of stuff. And Jeffrey would have to just sit there and just listen to that from the other room. So, and mind you, he had another sibling too that was a toddler. Because one time when Jeff came home, the toddler was in the crib, well, in the little playpen, crying. The mother wasn't there. Turns out she OD'd. His mother overdosed, and she's laid out on the bed. They get home. He calls 911 for the ambulance to come home. The dad comes home, and he said, "Oh, what did she do now? Oh, this is all just an act." So, because he's used to her being dramatic. He was used to her behavior. He didn't really think that his wife OD'd because he knew her for taking pills. So this time she took one too many and actually did overdose and almost died right there in the house while the toddler's in the playpen and she's in the bed, knocked, like slumped over, like them people I talked about in my opioid videos. So I think that pretty much covers that part of the that particular part of the episode. I think they fast forward a little bit more to when Jeffrey is a little bit older, and he starts he's older now. He's more like a teenager now. I think like maybe no, I think he's out of high school because the way that they do the jump force and the jump backs in this series is kind of interesting because it doesn't go in a particular order. It's like they'll be in the present day, then they'll come back, then the present day come back a little bit more, but not too far back, and then they'll go. It's like the way that they jump around is very interesting. But I'm trying to remember. So I think at this point now in the episode, he is, I want to say in Miami. It's in some kind of tropical climate because I saw palm trees. I think he's somewhere in a tropical climate and he's working like at a butcher shop, the last place he needs to be at. He calls his dad. He said he's not having fun where he's at. He's not meeting new people. He wants to come home and all types of things like that. So his dad, picks him up from the airport. He comes home and he says, if you're going to come home, you're going to work and you're going to do this. You're not just going to lay around and do nothing. So, he works, he cuts the grass. He's with his grandmother. And his grandmother's a very old lady and all types of stuff like that. But here's when another creep factor comes in, because now I remember this. There was a part where he went to a store because the butcher at the job that he has, he had to wear a particular shirt. He had to wear like a white shirt, and he had on a black shirt. And the owner said, no, you're going to wear the proper attire and you have to wear a white shirt. So Jeffrey goes to the store, he buys this white shirt, and as he's at the register, he looks over and he sees this silver male mannequin where one of the people are, dressing up the mannequin. You know how people work in the store and dress up the mannequin, and you can tell he got turned on by seeing that mannequin. So what does Jeffrey do? He takes what he purchases, he goes into the fitting room, closes the curtain, and climbs onto the little bench where you sit at and curls up like into the fetal position so no one can see his feet because there's a little opening right there. And he stays there after closing. So no one knows he's still in the store. Once the lights go out and everyone has left, he walks out of the fitting room. He goes to the mannequin, picks it up piece by piece, and walks out of the store. I don't know how he got out the store because I thought all the doors were locked. And he goes back to his grandmother's house, goes upstairs, puts the mannequin back together, and literally is laying in the bed and caressing the mannequin as if it was a real man. I'm talking about rubbing on the chest, on the torso area, and down to that area, and just fantasizing as if it was a real man. And it was at that point, if you didn't know Jeffrey Dahmer was in the academy, you knew after that scene right there. Let me read what some of y'all are saying. I told you it's a lot. Like I said, this all happened in episode 2 right here, and we still aren't even done yet. RD Titan said this Dahmer issue is disturbing. Oh, don't I know it? It really is. It really is. Black TS4 said, I laughed so hard. Yeah, that was a creepy scene right there. I was like, if they start playing some porn star music, I'm like, hold on, what y'all doing here? But yeah, he was a sick man. That was his fantasy. RD Titan said, I think his daddy knew what was up with him. In my honest opinion, he probably did. Most likely he did. A lot of parents will know, but he was probably in denial because he was asking him, is there anyone that you met out there? Have you met any girls? Have you talked to any girls? And then Jeffrey would kind of dodge the question. He would say something else or whatever. And then his dad would just kind of leave it alone. Even his grandmother had asked him and said, ask Jeffrey, have you met any girls where you were at? And she said, there's some nice girls down at the church that I go to. Maybe I can introduce you to one of them. He just seemed so disinterested. He seemed disinterested in church. We know he was disinterested in girls. He was just like, he had a whole nonchalantness to him. Like it was a stone face. Even his tone was very bland. He rarely showed any emotion until his grandmother found the mannequin. I'm gonna go back to that though. Now let's fast forward to present day again. Now this also talks about the 14-year-old. Now, when it comes to Jeffrey Dahmer and how many people have come to know him, a lot of people came to know him from the murder that he committed on the 14-year-old Asian boy. So basically what happened was you had this 14-year-old Asian boy. He was outside of a store with his friends, and they couldn't go into the store and buy things where they had to be a certain age or they had to show ID, whether it was cigarettes or liquor or beer. So Jeffrey goes to the store. He goes to buy the liquor. He said, how old are you? And he told him, I'm 19. Jeffrey knew he was lying because he was like, if you were of age to get this stuff, you wouldn't be out here just sitting here soliciting. So he said, okay, I'll go in here and I'll go and buy this liquor or this beer for you if you come back to my place. So because the boy wanted the beer so bad, he went and he bought it and followed Jeffrey back to his apartment, leaving his friends there. So he goes there, get back to the apartment. They're sitting on the couch, and then Jeffrey had offered him like some money, I think like $100, I guess, to take pictures. But then the boy notices and realizes who Jeffrey is. He said, you're the one that tried to attack my brother. Now, the 14-year-old has an older brother, and he almost became a victim of Jeffrey Dahmer's as well. And the boy recognized him. And Jeffrey was like, well, if you knew who I was, why did you come back to the apartment with me? And I almost asked the same question because I would have not gone back to him no matter what was offered. But he must have wanted that beer really bad. But he was a 14-year-old impressionable boy. Impressionable boy. So then all of a sudden, fast forward a little bit, it goes to Glenda's apartment, and you can hear the drills, you can hear the machines, and of course that smell got even more foul. It got even more foul in the apartment. And then all of a sudden, the boy manages to get out of the apartment. He finds a way to get himself out of the apartment. He is so dazed. He is so high and out of his mind. He could barely walk. Like, he's literally stumbling. And you see two black girls that are right there in the hallway, and they see him and they're asking him, is he all right? Do you need some help? What's going on? He's not talking. Right, Erica? Thank you, Erica. You said the boy needed the money. Yeah, because his family was strapped for cash. So he was willing to do anything to get that money. But he's walking down the hallway. He's dazed. He's all over the place. He can barely move. And then all of a sudden, he runs into these two cops. And these two cops right here were the most problematic cops of the entire movie, of the entire series, I should say. So he runs into them, and then they pick him up, and then they take him back to the apartment complex. And they're just waiting with him there. Glenda is outside with those two girls that they saw in the hallway, because I believe they called him or something like that. And then Jeffrey comes back, because the reason why he was able to get out is because Jeffrey wasn't in the apartment at the time. He went somewhere. I don't know where he went, but he was walking back. And when he walked around that corner, you should have saw the look on his face. He looked so shocked. Like, what's going on? He's like, oh, I see cops here. That boy's here. The neighbors are outside. These two black girls are outside. What am I going to do? How am I going to cover this? So he walks up to them, and they ask him, do you know who this is? He's like, yeah, I know who this is. He said, this is my boyfriend. Glenda's like, boyfriend? He looks like a kid. He looks like a minor. And they were asking him, how old is he? He said he's 19. Remember, the boy told Jeffrey that he was 19. He knew he was a teenager, though. He told him he was 19 when he wanted to go and buy that beer. But he knew he was lying, but that was the number that came to him, because that's how old the boy told him he was. He said he was 19. He's like, 19? He doesn't look 19. He looks like a child. And the cops believed him. They took his word. And let Jeffrey take this kid back into the apartment, where, of course, we know what ended up happening. Now, in the series, one of the boys said he was bleeding from his head. The reason why he was bleeding from his head is because Jeffrey had drilled a hole into his head. Jeffrey had drilled a hole into this boy's head. That was another reason why he was kind of out of it, because it probably hit a nerve. And in that hole, what Jeffrey was going to do was he was going to clean that area out with acid. If you remember in episode 1, when Tracy was in the room, he saw a barrel. It was a big, giant green barrel. And in that barrel, it had acid and body parts. The acid was basically to wipe away like the flesh of the bodies of the parts, to get rid of it. So that means all that would be left would be bones. Makes it hard to identify. Yes, and another thing too that I forgot to mention, Jeffrey kept the bones, he kept the limbs all scattered around his apartment, in the drawers, in the closet, in the barrel, skulls, fingers, legs, everywhere. It was feet. It was everywhere in his apartment. That's why his apartment stank like that, because he kept them. Whatever he didn't eat, of course, because like I said, he did eat some of the organs of these people. And that's pretty much episode 2. Let me see what y'all talking about in the chat. Mr. said neurotic acid for a makeshift lobotomy to create a zombie. The 8 of it says, wow, seems like a very graphic deal. I'm glad I'm hearing about it now. Yes, it goes into very great detail and it is very graphic. It is very graphic. Black brother said, sick bastard. He definitely is, or was, I should say. Nate Blast 90 says, clearly he didn't think people would smell his apartment. And that's the thing. He got so adapted to that smell that even he didn't think that it smelled. He got so used to that smell. And I think what warmed him up to it was him working in that butcher shop and him dissecting that roadkill with his dad when he was younger. So he is like over the years, he was getting used to that smell. So by the time it became a reality when he started doing it on human beings, it wouldn't be that bad for him. And that 69 mega is back again. Somebody blocked them again. It's probably the same person. John Davis said Jeff was trying to turn the victims into sex slaves so they wouldn't leave him. And that actually goes into another thing too. He also appeared to me to have some kind of separation anxiety or something like that, where he felt like everyone was around him was leaving him and he was always a loner. So he always wanted to have some kind of companionship. And this is how he went about it. King SB said this is going on in present day. You're actually right. I actually came across a story that I'm gonna probably upload hopefully this week that actually echoes what this is, but not to this extent. All right, so let's go on to the next episode. We on episode 3, y'all. We on episode 3. Episode 3 is called Doing a Dahmer. And the synopsis to that is left to live alone after his parents' turbulent divorce. High school senior Jeff breaks routine when he invites a hitchhiker to his home. And that is how we segue into murder number 1 of 16. A lot of people think that Jeffrey Dahmer murders more so happened in the early 90s and 80s. No, his first murder happened in the late 70s. And it was a PC guy. And basically, what happened with this episode is Jeffrey Dahmer, he's in high school now. And, he's still very awkward. He's still a very awkward individual, but he's only used as form of entertainment. Like he was going around imitating like a person who has like special needs, but he would use his dad as the focal point as if something was inherently wrong with his dad, which I thought was kind of disrespectful because his dad wasn't special needs at all. And that's also too where he started to like take classes where he would learn how to dissect different things of that nature and things like that. And it was one scene in there where he's sitting in the classroom and he's sitting next to this girl and she's basically saying, oh, I don't want to dissect anything because it just seems kind of icky. It's kind of disgusting to me. Like, why do we have to do this? Jeffrey looks over at her and basically tells her to shut the F up. He says, you're interrupting the class. He was basically that upset with her for trying to impede on his process of learning how to properly dissect, even though he already knew how to do it on an amateur level. But he was so enamored with it that he would literally do anything to do it in a professional way. So the class is over. Fast forward, the class is over. He goes to the teacher and asks the teacher, can he take what he dissected home with him? And the teacher was like, in all my years of teaching, I think he said that 20 years, I've never had a student come to me and tell me that they wanted to take home the project. But, I'll let you do it. Like I said, even though Jeffrey Dahmer was weird, he had a charismatic way of trying to block it out from the view of people to not make it come across so creepy. So fast forward a little bit, Jeffrey Dahmer, he's by himself right now because his mother is still off the chain. His dad has remarried, and he's literally at home by himself. to the point where his mother actually, he went to the house, went to see his mother. His mother is packing up the car with his brother and leaving, and literally making him feel like he's the reason why she is leaving. She's basically telling him, you ain't ish, your dad ain't ish, the only one I'm gonna take care of is your brother. I'm not gonna let you or your daddy corrupt him, and a host of other things. She got so upset because he would not come to her about his little projects that he would do his dad. It's almost like it was a jealousy thing. Like she was jealous that he would not come to her to help him with projects. But how was he supposed to do that? Because the only time that you was really there was to argue with his dad. And if you weren't doing that, you were popping pills and ODing. Like, where's the communication? How are you going to communicate with a person who's passed out, who looks like they're about to die, and argue with a person who's always arguing with their dad? Like, there was no way that it was going to work. So she drives off, and now he's in the home by himself, just by himself. The dad's not there, his mother's not there, the brother's not there. He's just by himself in this house. So then he starts like driving every day down the same path, I guess probably to get home or wherever he was going. He will always see this guy running, exercising, just running and running. Every day he had on like the shorts and no shirts. He was just exercising. And he was like driving every day. And then one day he decides to walk to the area where the guy who was running would run past. He doesn't drive. He just walks there and hides in the bush with a baseball bat in his hand. I'm like, oh God, is this the guy that he gets first? Because that's what I'm thinking. That's the first thing I'm thinking, that this is the first guy he's going to go after. So the guy is running again. Then Jeffrey just hops out of the bush like this, like, with the bat in his hand. And the guy's looking like, at first I'm thinking he's going to swing and knock him out. But then Jeffrey kind of has a fantasy moment where this guy comes back to the home with him. But it's just a fantasy. It never happens. Then it comes back and he snaps back into reality, and the guy's looking at him and runs back the other way, frantically scared. And then he never sees that guy again, which is a good thing. Then all of a sudden, Jeffrey, now he's driving down that path, that dirt road again, and he comes across this other guy. Now, this is a different person. This is not the same guy as before. So the guy, he's trying to get a ride. He's hitching a ride, and he's telling Jeffrey that Jeffrey's asking. He said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, I'm trying to go to this concert, with him and his friends, which is about an hour away." And he says, like, I forgot if he said something was wrong with his car or something like that. And he said he just needed to use a phone or something to that effect. And then Jeffrey was like, well, my home is on this way, I can take you to my house so you can use the phone. So the guy gets into the car, he introduces himself. Jeffrey tells him who his name is, and then they go back to the house. So they're at the house, and Jeffrey has weights out. Like, because Jeffrey had like a bench press there and some other weights, because Jeffrey worked out. So the other guy worked out too. And he just basically saying, why don't we just like lift some weights and everything like that to help pass the time? Because he was asking, what time did you have to be there? He's like, in an hour or a little over an hour. They're pushing the weights out and everything like that. Then all of a sudden, Jeffrey does the creep thing. He leans in to kiss this man. He actually kisses him. He leans in and he kisses this man. Now, this man is straight. He's heterosexual. He doesn't play for the other team. And then that's when the guy is like, oh, you know what? I got to get out of here. He's like, what are you doing? You're crazy and everything like that. He said, but wait, I thought you wanted to work out and, hang for a little bit. Like I said, the demeanor of Jeffrey Dahmer is so crazy because he was always so nonchalant. You really rarely ever saw him lose his cool. But I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I think probably in the next episode. He was always calm. Now, what he did next is a prerequisite to how Jeffrey Dahmer dies. But so basically what happens is the guy literally turns around to leave out of the house. Jeff grabs one of the weights like a dumbbell and whacks this guy over the head. He whacks the guy over the head, turns the guy over, Jeffrey gets on top of him and begins to strangle him to death. And that is how Jeffrey Dahmer killed his first victim. So now naturally Jeffrey has to get the body out of the house, because Jeffrey is like saying to himself, like, I didn't mean, in his own way, he's saying, oh, it went too far, I wasn't supposed to kill him or anything like that. I'm like, you took a weight to the head, the guy's head is bleeding. Either he was going to have a concussion and some serious brain damage, or he was going to die. It was one of the two was going to happen. So now Jeffrey takes the body out of the home and drags it into the area where him and his dad found that dead possum all those years ago, and leaves it there. But then Jeffrey realizes that the smell from that could come into the house, and anyone can walk through that door at any time. So he goes back hours later out to that area where he left the body at, drags it back out from under the house, and carries the body to the shed. And there is where he gets a whole bunch of tools and he cuts the body up. I'm talking about with saws, electric saws, drills, everything. Then he takes every limb of the body and puts it into different trash bags. And he takes the excess blood and dumps it in the toilet and flushes it. So it's no extra blood around. He literally scoops the blood up, puts it in the toilet and flushes it. Then he puts all the bags in the car and he's driving. Then he gets pulled over by some cops because he's swerving. Is at night. He's driving and he's swerving. Now what I'm about to tell you is exactly how you know white privilege is a thing. And it showed you even back then that it was. So he gets pulled over by these cops because they said he was swerving. And they asked him for his license and registration, and he gives them the license. And they take the flashlight and look in the back, and they said, what's all these trash bags back here for? He said, oh, I was just cutting some grass, and all of these bags have grass in them. Now, one thing that would have had my antenna going off is, why are you cutting grass at night? Usually when people cut grass is during the day. Why are you cutting grass at night? And he said he was going to the dump. Do you know that they took whatever he said and said, you know what? I'm just going to let you off with a warning because I don't want to ruin your future. What does that sound like? Doesn't that sound like some of the stuff that they say to PC people today? I don't want to ruin your future, so I'm going to let you off with a warning. Just go back to your house. They could have got him right there, but they didn't. So he drives off, goes to the dump and dumps actually, he doesn't even go to the dump. He goes and he digs up, he literally digs up multiple graves and dumps the bags into various graves that he digs up, and then buries them all in multiple areas. Jonathan said they were on code back then. Exactly. That just shows you how deep the code is. That code was not something that they just popped up with in the last century. Well, in the last 10, 20 years. This has been here for a while. Cole Red said, we don't want to hurt his quote unquote feelings. Alana Trotman said, affluenza boy. We're going to get to that, Black TS brother. We're going to get to that. But yeah, I think that pretty much wrapped up episode 3. Let me see what y'all talking about in the chat. Nate Blast said Tamir Rice didn't get a future, but this sicko did. Yeah. Mr. Mrs. said he said his parents were going through a divorce and they felt empathy for him. Yeah, that 69 that person gonna keep on popping up throughout this stream. They only come on certain streams, though. They don't come on every stream, but ironically, they're coming onto this stream. Larry Hamilton said that house was behind the hotel that I stayed at. Wow. And that, like I said, I think that was pretty much all of episode 3. There might have been some other things in there, but those were the main takeaways from that episode. So now we are moving on to episode 4. Episode 4 is titled The Good Boy Box. And the synopsis of that reads: from high school to the army, Jeff struggles to find stability. While living in his grandmother's house, Jeff begins targeting young men at gay bars. So now we are back in Jeff's house, and now I'm going to go back a little bit to no, I'm not going to go to that yet. I'm not going to go to that yet. So now we're back at Jeff's grandmother's house. He's staying with her. Like I said in the previous episodes, he's there with her and all types of stuff like that. This guy literally started to bring his work home with him. He started to bring his work home with him and started to do the deeds inside of his grandmother's basement. Like, it was a whole setup down there that he would start doing all these kind of stuff, like his little quote unquote experiments. That's what he would call them, inside of his grandmother's home. Now, remember, his grandmother's an old lady, but she was kind of sharp in the head though, up until she lost her, memory. But that's a little bit later when she got dementia. She would always kind of like worry and wonder like what's going on, like the smell and the usual things when it came to him. But this was also an episode where he was at at the carnival. This part was so weird. I didn't know why he did it, but it was so weird to me. So he's at the carnival and he's drinking his beer. Like I told you, Jeff was a very heavy drinker and a heavy smoker. Then he finished drinking the beer. Then he had the hammer where he hit the little lever and it shoots up and hits the little target, little ding bell at the top. Then all of a sudden, and maybe someone in the chat can actually, who watched this, can answer this for me, because I didn't understand this part. He was at a game. It was a game that had a lot of lights on it, and it went around in a circle. This guy literally dropped his pants and started masturbating at the game. I don't know what that was about. I have no clue why he did that. Maybe somebody in the chat who has watched the series already can explain to me why he did that, because I didn't catch that. Maybe I should have went back and watched it and see if it was anything that I missed. But I don't understand why he did that. He literally dropped his pants right there at that game while people are walking by and just started masturbating right there at the machine, right at the game. Nate Blast 9 said it is a circle jerk. Okay, I'm seeing DJ said he saw a vision of the first dude he killed. It was a flashback of his first kill. Okay, so now I got it, because I didn't catch it. Like I said, maybe it was something that I missed, but that also shows you right there what turned him on. Jeffrey Dahmer got turned on by literal death. Okay, Jeffrey Dahmer was turned on by death, or seeing what it is that he did. That's what he got turned on by. He got turned on by torture. Torture porn literally is what would turn him on. And that's actually gonna something else that happened in this episode. And someone mentioned that someone mentioned about the military. Crystal said he even got put out of the military. He did get put out of the military. Why? Because he was being a perv. That scene where one of the military personnel was sitting there asleep, and he literally just started to crawl on top of this person with no shame. So yeah, he did get put out of the military because his dad made him go in there, and then that happens and he gets kicked out of the military. But one thing that was so weird though, and I think it happened in this episode, was when he applied for a job at a doctor's office. He applied for a job at a doctor's office. He got hired. That's one thing about Jeffrey Dahmer. It wasn't hard for him to get a job. It was hard for him to keep the job because he was always doing weird stuff. He got a job working at a doctor's office. And in the scene, he was in charge of drawing blood out of the patients, I guess, for blood work. So he's talking to one of the patients while he's drawing their blood, and he just basically talking, doing a bunch of weird stuff. Like the patient is looking at him like, "Who is this guy drawing my blood? And why is he talking to me like this? Why is he talking about that?" And he drew like 3 bags of blood. I don't know if it all came from the same person or 3 different people. Do you know that Jeffrey Dahmer took those packets of blood home with him, cut the bag open, and began to drink it like he was a vampire in need of feeding? Like he literally snatched it off and chucked it back like it was his beer. And all you saw in the scene was blood literally dripping down his face and onto his shirt. It looked like he was hesitant to do it at first, but then he was like, F it, and just chugged it down. And blood is just literally coming down his face and down his shirt. Now, here's the thing. What if that blood was contaminated? I mean, he probably wouldn't know if it was, if it wasn't, but still, he wasn't authorized to take that out of the hospital or out of that office, but he did anyway. Now, I believe also in the same episode, and this goes back to what I said about him being turned on by death. They were still asking him, is he like does he like girls, and is he talking to any girls and anything like that? Of course, he's still staying in office. So what he does is he tries to psych himself into it. He gets a magazine, it's probably a Playboy magazine, and he's looking at different pages of different girls, with their tops down, their breast exposed, and he starts masturbating, to the girls in the picture. But nothing's working. Nothing is working. He cannot bring himself to have, to ejaculate. So what does he do in order to make himself come? He envisions in his mind, or he thinks back to the time when he dissected one of those roadkills or whatever he was dissected, and was feeling on the inside where the organs were at and rubbing on the organs. That's what made him ejaculate. So that goes back to what I was saying about him being turned on by death or being turned on by carcasses. And that's actually going to be something that they talk about later on when he's talking to his therapist, the jail therapist, later on in the I forgot what episode it was, but it was later on. And it's crazy because the day I was actually getting my hair braided, me and the person who did it, we were watching that episode, and I picked up on that instantly, because I said it's stuff like that many people wouldn't catch, but I caught that instantly. I said, this man is turned on by death. That death is what turns him on. Anything living doesn't turn him on. And they actually have a terminology for that, which the therapist did mention in the later episodes. Let me see if there's anything else in here that I don't think it was anything else in here that I missed. It might have been some other things, but yeah, for the most part, I think I caught it all for episode 4. Jason Ferrer said, no, it's not necrophilia. I thought it was necrophilia too, but necrophilia is to have sex with a corpse or around a corpse. But it wasn't necrophilia, it was something else. But philia was in the title, but I forgot what the doctor called it. It began with an S though. I know it began with an S. Just let me see what else y'all are saying. DJ said he got an honorable discharge. Yeah, that's crazy. How he got an honorable discharge for that is wild to me. That should have been a dishonorable discharge, like full stop. How he got an honorable discharge is beyond me. Like, that's crazy. He definitely should have got dishonorable discharge. Black TS4 brother said it starts with a P. Maybe like I said, I can't remember what the official title of that was, but I know it had philia in the title in there. I do know that because I thought it was necrophilia too. All right. So now we are going to move on to episode 5. Episode 5 was titled Blood on Their Hands. And the synopsis of this one is Jeff's list of victims grows longer without a full police investigation. An encounter with a teen lands him in jail. Later, he gets his own apartment. And that's the one I think about, the Asian boy. But this episode, what I can remember of it, he's still again at his grandmother's house, but now he's getting more frequent to going to these bars. Oh, before I go any further, because I want to make sure that I had this. Jeffrey Dahmer used to frequent these bathhouses. He used to go to these academy bathhouses, which is basically, a place where they go to have sex. And he would go there multiple nights with different men every single night, a different man. And every time they're getting ready to do something, Jeffrey gave them a drink that has something in it, and every time they will be found passed out in there. He literally got kicked out and banned out of these bathhouses for life. Like, the person who runs it would not allow him to come back in there because he was always drugging somebody. He was always drugging somebody that came through there. It never got to the point where he would delete them, but he was always drugging them. And a lot of the times, he wasn't even having sex with these people. He was just drugging them and just leaving them there. But he ended up getting banned and kicked out of the bathhouses, and he couldn't come back. Right, DJ? And the person who owned that bathhouse told the other one, said, don't let this guy come in there because he's going to drug your customers. So he pretty much was getting blackballed. But I just had to throw that in there. Now, this one follows an individual. I forgot his name, and it was a black guy. And he was coming out of the bar, I believe, and he was trying to get, start his car, but the car wouldn't start. And then Jeffrey's walking down the street and he sees him and he says, it looks like you're having car trouble or something like that. He said, well, my car's not starting and whatnot. And I'm trying to go home and things like that. And then Jeffrey said, well, you can come back to my grandmother's house, which is right over here. And you can try to use, a phone, or maybe stay the night, and then we can work something out in the morning. Of course, what Jeffrey's ulterior motives was. So Jeffrey, took the guy back to his grandmother's house, did the same routine, because everything Jeff really did was kind of routine. He just bring him over, drug him, kill him, pack him up, dump him. Next night, pick him up, drug him, kill him, pack him up, out. It was a routine thing for him, which he was going to do with him. Now, he gave the guy the drink. The guy drank it. He ends up feeling woozy. He's kind of out of it, and he falls asleep right there on the couch. Thankfully, his grandmother was of sound mind, came downstairs, saw the guy laid out on the couch. Jeffrey just basically lied to her and said that's his friend that he met at the club. He was tired. He was having car trouble. I told him we'll help him out in the morning. And the grandmother says, well, you know what? I'm going to stay down here and, to make sure that he's good. And then we will help him out in the morning to get him where he needs to be. I said, thank you, because if the grandmother had went back upstairs, Jeffrey was going to kill him. Jeffrey was so mad. The look on his face was one of disappointment because he felt his grandmother blocked his kill. Black brother said his real name was Dylan Burnside. Okay. I couldn't think of his name. Forgive me. His name was Dylan Burnside. So the next morning comes. He's still kind of out of it because Jeff put a lot of drugs. That's the thing. Jeff did not do dosage amounts. He just took a pack or whatever and just dumped it into the cup, stirred it around, and gave it to the person. And that was it. So now they're at the bus stop. Him, his grandmother, and the guy. They put him on the bus, and he's he's just still laid out in the bus path, like kind of in and out, passed out, whatever the case may be. So the bus driver literally takes him to the end of the line, and he said, yo, we at the end of the line. I can't take you anywhere else. So he gets off the bus, still kind of out of it, still walking, kind of in a dazed state because he gave him some powerful drugs. This guy almost got hit by a car. Like he's walking across the street, and I'm thinking, oh snap, he's gonna get hit by a car. But the car luckily caught him and stopped. And then all of a sudden, this guy was so out of it, he ended inside of a cornfield. How he ended up in a cornfield, I don't know. He ended up in a cornfield where he then passes out. And he is so lucky. I don't know how anyone would have saw him over all of that tall stalk of corn. Got him, took him to the hospital, and he's waking up. I don't know how many days could have passed, if it was a day or two, how many days. And he wakes up, and the nurses basically tell him that you're in the hospital. Some people found you, they brought you here, and whatnot. Now, here's where it gets kind of interesting because Jeffrey, he woke up, some money was missing, and he took something else. Like it was, I think he said like $200 was missing, and something else was taken from him. So when he does all of that, then sorry about that, y'all. So he basically wakes up and he doesn't know where he's at. He doesn't know what's going on. All of his stuff is like pretty much taken. A lot of his stuff is taken. So now he has to try to do a self-investigation on how to get his probably not to get his stuff back. At this point, he really can care less. But he really wants to now get Jeffrey. Now he really wants to take him down, like because clearly he's doing a lot. So this is where the whole thing of a black man, no matter what his lifestyle is, goes and tries to tell the cops about Jeffrey Dahmer. So he talks to the cop. Eventually, the cop agrees to go out to the grandmother's house and talk to Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey is telling a bunch of lies. Even the grandmother, at some extent, pretty much gets on code, but she only goes and tells as much as she could tell from her perspective. But Jeffrey is like probably filling her head with a bunch of lies anyway, because her mind's on the way out. And then they go back and tell him about what they heard and what they saw, which was a bunch of nothing. Well, it was from him it was a bunch of nothing, but the guy's like, then that's when the racial aspect thing comes up. He's like, so this, we know that this is a white guy, with me being a black guy, is like, this is really why you don't want to help me and things like that. Of course, the cop is not going to say what it is, but we know what it is. The guy gets up and he walks out. Then it's now nighttime. The guy's walking down the street. And then who does he see right there at that bar? Jeffrey Dahmer with another potential victim about to get into a cab. Luckily that guy's there. He literally stops the guy from getting in the cab and says, don't get in that cab. That guy's going to kill you. The guy doesn't look at him crazy or anything like that. He just takes his word for it and leaves. Jeffrey looks at him and why did you do that? And all types of stuff like that. And he's basically telling the guy, we're going to take you down and things like that. Then Jeffrey gets into the cab and he goes home. Black Native said that Sicko had a thing for black skin. He worked at a chocolate factory in Wisconsin. He did, because it was one of the episodes where they actually showed him working at that chocolate factory. He did work there. And I think he did put something in the chocolate. It was probably like sugar or something like that, but he probably was hoping that it was those drugs because it was a white powdery substance. And I believe that's how episode 5 ended. Let's see what y'all are talking about in the chat. Heat St. Cloud, he said, still got jobs like nothing in housing. He's at real. So after seeing his crime scenes, I couldn't watch anything relating to that freak. Understandable. Black TS4 brother said he was pissed. He was very pissed. Anytime he felt like there was an imposition on him getting the kill from anyone, that always made him mad. Any type of interjection pissed him off. Let's see what else y'all are talking about in here. Yep, you said he saved his life. Yep. All right, now. On to episode 6. Now, episode 6 was probably the most heartbreaking episode out of all of them. As a matter of fact, when I had to look up the synopsis for each of these episodes, they said that like episode 6 was one of the ones that had a write-up. And they basically said episode 6 was a very heartbreaking episode. Now, episode 6 is called Silenced. It says aspiring model Tony Hughes moves to Madison, Wisconsin, and meets Jeff at a bar, beginning a relationship through handwritten notes that takes a dark turn. Now, this episode right here focused just on these two individuals, mainly on Tony Hughes, but between as far as two people go, it was just these two. So Tony Hughes is, of course, he was a black man and he was deaf. He was, I believe, probably Jeffrey Dahmer's only victim that had a disability. So he was deaf and he was a man, he was in the academy. See, Monica S said episode 6 broke her heart. And it's crazy because when I was on Twitter and I was talking about it, someone else said that episode 6 was a hard watch. And it is. Episode 6 out of all of them was probably the hardest one to get through. And you'll see what I mean when I talk about it. But Tony Hughes, he was deaf in this he was pretty much born that way, because they actually showed at the beginning of the episode of him being born. He was actually one of the only ones who was a victim of Jeffrey Dahmer's that got a backstory. The rest of them, they kind of just started them right where they were at, but he actually got a backstory. So that's how you know this one hit hard for a lot of people. So he's born, they fast forwarded to more present day at the time, which was in the early 90s, which was like 91, I believe. He has a family. He has, I think, 2 sisters. He lives with his mother and I think a brother as well. Now, for those of you who don't know who played the mother, that was Karen Molina White. If y'all don't know who Karen Molina White is, she played Charmaine on The Cosby Show and A Different World. That's her. When I saw her, I said, wait a minute, that was like Charmaine. And that was definitely her. But I'm glad that she did a role where she could do a dramatic piece, because we always have known her for doing comedy. So shout out to her. And she was also in Lean on Me. So shout out to her for doing this part. But she played his mother. And I thought it was interesting because they showed the family dynamic between them. How, of course, they had to adapt with him having to sign and him being deaf, and how they had to communicate with him. It was a very solid family structure they had between them. Like, they had a really nice family dynamic between all of them. He, pretty much raised right, a good individual, a nice person. He was just deaf, and he was in the academy. So, he had friends. He would go to the bar and hang out and whatnot. And then, he went to, Wisconsin, because he wasn't from Wisconsin. He just went there because like he said, he was an aspiring model. Like, he even tried to apply for different jobs. But, back then they didn't have discriminatory laws in place that would protect him to get a job, like, working in certain places. So for them to say, oh, we couldn't accept you because you're deaf, that wouldn't have been a hindrance on the business. So I think he went and tried to work at a record store, and it was like, how is he going to work in a record store and he's deaf? Like, how's that going to work? That's not going to work at all. So he goes to different places and he pretty much gets the door slammed in his face. So he ends up, like, taking up modeling. So, he takes some pictures, he wants to be on GQ and all types of things. He has very aspiring and hopes and dreams. So fast forward a little bit, everything just seems to be going right for him, especially living in a city where he's away from his family and he's deaf. So his mother, of course, naturally is going to worry about him, because he's going to function a little bit different than everybody else. So fast forward, he's at the bar, he sees Jeffrey at the bar. Jeffrey's eyeing him and everything like that. And, he starts to communicate with Jeffrey. Now, of course, because he's deaf, he would write the stuff down on the pad and show it to Jeffrey, because he was deaf and Jeffrey didn't really know sign language like that. And I think when it comes to this, Tony Hughes was probably one of the only people that Jeffrey cared about. With the other ones, he really didn't care. If he wanted to go for the kill, he was going to go for the kill. But in the scene where he was about to put the drugs in the drink, He opens up the pack with the drugs, but then he takes it and folds it back up and puts it in his pocket and just gives Tony the drinks, and that's that. So when I saw that, I said, "Oh, he has a soft spot for him. He has a soft spot for him because he didn't drug him. He didn't. I think at first he didn't have any intentions of killing him. It actually started to blossom, quote unquote, into a relationship. Like he actually had a boyfriend. So I guess in a way you could say Tony Hughes was probably Jeffrey Dahmer's one and only boyfriend. If that makes sense. For those of you who've seen the movie, if you interpret it that way, that's how I interpreted it. So they just started hanging out more. He would go with him to his photo shoots, and that's where Jeffrey first picked up a camera because he was at one of his photo shoots and the photographer's taking the pictures. And then the photographer asked him, "Do you want to take a pictures, of your man?" And Jeffrey takes the camera and he starts taking pictures of him. So that right there is where the whole thing of Jeffrey wanting to take pictures of his victims came from, was at that moment right there. Because at that point, up until that point, Jeffrey didn't take pictures. So he started taking pictures of him at his photo shoots. They started hanging out more, started going on dates, going out to restaurants, all types of things. Then it picks up where they're going into the apartment, which actually leaves off from one of the episodes, and it comes back to that. So they go into the apartment, they go in there, and they are about, they pretty much do the deed. They pretty much do that. And then Tony wakes up and says, "Oh snap, I gotta go. Oh, let me go back a little bit." He comes back home, sees his parents, oh no, his mother, his family, finds out his sister is pregnant, and his sister tells him that, "I'm going to name my child after you." Little did they know is in that dinner scene, that would be the last time they would see their brother and their son alive. That would be the last time they would ever see him alive. Because he went back to Wisconsin to go see Jeff. Then that's when he went to the apartment. And, they did whatever. And then Tony got out of the bed and said, "Oh, snap, I got to leave because I got to go to work." And that was when the real Jeffrey Dahmer started to come out. Because as Tony was preparing to leave the apartment and get ready to leave to go to work, Jeffrey went and grabbed a hammer. He hid the hammer behind his back as if he was getting ready to use it. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. As a matter of fact, there was a time when Jeffrey almost wanted to drug him again, but he didn't do it. That's how I know that Jeffrey actually had feelings for him. I don't know if it was a pity thing because he was deaf or because he actually liked him. So he literally, has the hammer behind his back. Tony hugs him and leaves the apartment. And then he drops the hammer. Then all of a sudden, a knock comes on the door. Tony comes back and says, "Oh, I left something." And then that's when I said, "Oh no, it's about to happen." Jeff goes and picks up the hammer, and Tony is out of there. The next time you see him, he's laid on the bed with the mattress, a bare mattress. And then Jeff comes over and sits on the bed and holds his hand. Mind you, this man is dead. Now, y'all remember how in the first episode we was talking about Tracy Edwards laid on the bed and there was a blood stain on the mattress and a dead body on the floor? Tony Hughes was that dead body on the floor. That blood spot came from when he got hit in the head. So when we was wondering who was that, that was him. That was him. And then you had they was looking for his mother was looking for him because he hadn't called in a couple of days. He was missing. They hadn't heard from him and all types of stuff like that. They started putting up like missing person signs. They even went to the college where he went and attended. And who shows up to throw some money into the fund jar? The fund jar. Jeffrey Dahmer. So it was at that moment where Jeffrey, for the first time ever, saw Tony Hughes's family, his mother, his sisters, and his brother from a distance. After he dropped funds into that jar to help find their loved one, who they would never find alive. Not realizing that the person who just dropped money into that jar was the one who murdered him, like the night before or 2 nights before. Crazy, right? Yeah, that's right, the beast. He left his keys. J_B said currently watching on episode 5. We are discussing episode 6, so hopefully you don't stick around long because I don't want to spoil anything for you. Like, we already on episode 6. I'm about to head on and talk about episode 7. Like, we almost at the end. We got 3. Once I get on episode 7, we'll have 3 more to discuss after that. Then I'm gonna give my take on it overall. Janelle said he could never establish any relationship because he needed them to be dead. You're right about that. He thought he had something there, but like I said, he had some. I think he just had a severe case of separation anxiety. Like, anytime he felt like he had someone close to him, if he felt like they were going to leave him, that's when he really showed himself. And going back to the mannequin thing, uh, what was it? That was the first time I saw him snap, because he had told his grandmother not to go into his room when she was dropping off laundry. He said, just leave it by the door. I'll get it when I get home from work. She went in the room and she pulled back their sheets and she saw that it was that mannequin there. And when he found out that she had saw it, he popped off on her. I thought he was going to kill her. And she told him that she threw that mannequin in the dump or had them come and pick it up or something like that. He snapped on his grandmother when she did that. Gerald of Rivia, Jeffrey Dahmer was the embodiment of PC men in this establishment. All right, now we are headed on to talk about episode 7. And the name of this episode was called Cassandra. The synopsis goes: a prominent activist meets with Glenda, who recounts her harrowing experiences living next door to Jeff and how her concerns went largely ignored. So this episode right here is solely focused around Glenda Cleveland, who was played by Niecy Nash. So this episode really is about her. And the reason why they called this episode Cassandra is because Cassandra is the name of her daughter. At first, I was wondering why they called it Cassandra. I'm like, who is Cassandra? But Cassandra is the name of her daughter. So this basically goes back and it picks up where Glenda gets a knock on the door from the cops telling her that she has to evacuate the building because they have to clean everything out. This is after the events of episode 1. So they're going and they're telling her that she has to leave the apartment because they're going to be dealing with chemicals. They got to clean out the space and they can't afford to have anybody there because they can't have anyone getting sick. Like, they had to have people come in there with hazmat suits. It was that bad. It was that contaminated in there. So they go there, she leaves the apartment and now she's staying in some kind of motel. Shout out to TD Hip Hop Media for the super chat. I appreciate it. Thursday, TD. Thursday. I'm gonna put it like that. Thursday. Decretia Hearn said, was that this is that screaming her during the hearing? No, that wasn't. We're gonna get to that part too. I think that was in episode either 8 or 9, but I know who you're talking about. So back to this. She's staying at this this motel, and the activist that's coming to meet her and talk to her was Jesse Jackson. So Jesse Jackson basically comes there and he's riding with one of these other guys that's with him in the car. And it was like, why do we have to come out here to talk about this guy named Jeffrey Dahmer? Like, that's kind of out of our scope compared to what we're used to doing. And Jesse Jackson was like, why? Is it because the men were in the academy? And the guy kind of looks away, and that pretty much told you that, yeah, that's what he meant. He's like, these guys are in the academy. What does that have to do with what that we have going on. And he said that's that's the thing. But most of his victims have, if you've noticed, happen to be black. So there it is right there. So Jesse Jackson comes into town. He meets with Glenda, who, like I said, is at this hotel because she has to stay there because they're basically cleaning out the apartment complex. It's contaminated. And then that's when she starts to detail the stories that she was trying to tell the police about what it was like being the neighbor of Jeffrey Dahmer for so long. So she starts talking about, of course, the smells that would come from the apartment because it would come through the vents. She would talk about hearing the drills at night, hearing the different tools, hearing the screaming that would come from the apartment. Like, these were not quote unquote pleasure screams or someone maybe screaming at a movie or horror movie. These were screams of someone sounding like they were being tortured or dying. In this case, it was both of them. They were being tortured and they were dying. And she constantly called the cops. She literally, I don't know how many times she called those cops, but she called them a whole bunch of times. They kept giving her the runaround. They kept saying what they were going to do. They didn't do anything that they were supposed to do. And the Crimson Cure just showed up. Shout out to the Crimson Cure. She said, I just watched this. This was the best version of retelling that story. Hey, Kendra, are you, I don't know if you're, because I know you have a different type of audience that listens to like different type of things. Are you going to talk about this on your channel? Because if you are, I'm going to be locked in because I definitely got to hear your take about this. I definitely want to hear your take about this. Ms. Beautiful said he lobotomized his victim. He did. He did. He was into all of that stuff and he didn't care. But yeah, she called and she called and she called. They kept giving her the runaround. They came out. They a lot of them did like half-ass jobs. And I said, that's so interesting because that happens today. A lot of the stuff that is shown in this movie when it comes to the relations between the cops and black people happens today in real life. See, the thing is, most of his victims were black men in the academy. Let's take out the academy part right quick. They were black men. He was a white man living in a predominantly black apartment complex in a black neighborhood where the bar he would frequent had mainly black customers and clientele. They always sent out PC cops to this apartment. Not once did I think they ever sent a black cop out there. They always sent PC cops. And the thought of this black woman, and by the way, they actually, at the end of the first episode, I didn't say it, they actually played, was it the first episode or the second one? I think maybe the first one. They actually played the actual audio of the real Glenda Cleveland talking to one of the cops on the phone. And the way they would talk to her was so disrespectful. Okay, Quincy said, I know I had no intention of covering that movie, although it did have some interesting aspects. Okay, fair enough. But the way they would talk to her was so disrespectful. Like, they were so standoffish, like they didn't care. They was like, oh, these are just some niggas. And they're in the academy. Oh, we really don't care now. But she called so many times and they never answered her call. So one day, Glenda went to the landlord. It was a black man, a black foreigner man. And she basically said that, look, no, it was before that. And shout out to Black Native for the super chat. He's a great broadcast. I appreciate it. It was a guy that just moved into the building. It was a man that just went into the building, and it was a black man, and he was an artist. And he was basically helping her to move her stuff because it was no elevators in there. So she got acquainted with him and she moved in and helped him to the apartment. And he was asking her how the neighbors were and everything like that. She said, there's some good ones here, but there's also some downright tacky ones as well. We know who she was talking about, the one that lived next door to her. But he moved in and he was on the floor above them. And then he's leaving as she's saying their goodbyes to him. And all of a sudden, who does she see coming around the corner? Jeffrey Dahmer talking to this guy and trying to, do the Jeffrey charm, if you want to call it that, on this guy. And she's looking like it's almost like she wants to blurt out and tell him, don't go to him. Like, don't converse with him, nothing. But it's too late at this point. She really can't do it without being really giving away her position. So the guy tells Jeffrey what apartment he stays in. Fast forward, the guy's working on one of his little models, one of his toy models. Jeffrey comes and knocks on the door. They go out, whatever. Then they go back to his place. Then all of a sudden, she hears the noises again. She hears the noises again. And it's the guy that just moved in. Jeffrey is killing this man in his apartment at that moment. That's when she decides, okay, I'm going to go to the landlord and tell him we need to evict him. He needs to be evicted out of this apartment. So she goes to the landlord, who, like I said, is like a black foreign man. At first, he's like, I don't know if I can really do it, but she finds a way to convince him. She knocks on the door. He gives him the eviction letter. Now, Jeff is trying to cover his tracks because he called a cleaning person over to clean the apartment and try to get that smell out. But that doesn't work. The landlord gives him the eviction notice and basically says you got to be out in like 30 days. Then he asks him, did Glenda talk to you? Because he knows that she's the only one in the apartment that really has the biggest issue with him. So he figures it out. He closes the door, the landlord leaves, and all of a sudden Glenda gets a knock on the door. Then it's Jeffrey. Jeffrey is at the door and he has something behind his back. It's wrapped in foil and it's on a plate. He comes into the apartment. They're conversing and everything like that. He puts the plate on the table with it still wrapped in foil, and he says, I have a gift for you. Then he says, aren't you going to open your gift? He opens it up, and it's a sandwich. And I don't know what kind of meat that is, but my guess is it could be human meat. She says, I know you don't think I'm going to eat that. And then he kind of like leans in more and just tells her to eat the sandwich. But she's not eating, like she's not budging and everything like that. And he's basically telling her to call off the eviction. Almost in a threatening tone, but not too threatening. He's telling her to call off the eviction. She says, I'll call off the eviction if you tell me where that boy is. He doesn't tell her. She says, okay, well, I'm not calling off the eviction. Jeffrey gives her this look, like this death stare. And he looks at the door and realizes that Glenda left the door cracked. Her leaving that door crack saved her life, because if she left that door closed, he would have took her out right there. But because she left the door open, anybody can hear that, because now the volume of the voices gets out into the hallway and anyone can hear it and people won't run over. So she left that door open and he just walks out and he leaves. I can't remember if he closed the door, if he just left it open, but he left. And then, the episode continues. The sandwich is still sitting right there. Some other things, happen, and then the episode ends. It goes back to her talking to Jesse Jackson, and she basically is just sitting there crying because she has to recount all of that stuff. Then she has to think about all the time she called the cops and no one listened to her, and how all of that could have ended more sooner than later if they would have just listened. But because of them being so incompetent, this is what happened. This is what it is. Let me see what y'all are talking about. Mr. Mister says, she said, I'm not about to eat a sandwich made by a man whose apartment smells like a raccoon's ass. Isaiah said, Evan Peters is actually from St. Louis. Let's see. The creature said, what did the cops think the smell was? OMG, that yes, they do talk to us crazy. Crimson Cure said, Evan Peters is a tremendously underrated actor. He's an awesome actor and did a great job portraying Dahmer. He did. He really did. And I hate that we got to say that considering who Jeffrey Dahmer was. But I gotta give props where it is. Ms. Beautiful said, rest in peace, Glenda. Oh, she died? Oh wow, I didn't know that she passed. I didn't look up to see if she did, but I didn't know that she passed. Wow. Shout out to the Crimson Cure for the super chat. She said the series did a great job going into the fallout of his actions, what his neighbor went through, and what his father went through. How do you deal with your son when he's a monster? Right. Which actually segues into episode 8. which is titled Lionel, which is his dad's name. And ironically, I think that's Jeffrey Dahmer's middle name. So his middle name came from his dad. Episode 8 is entitled Lionel. So now it's talking about his dad. And it says the synopsis is, as Jeff awaits trial, his father deals with his own demons. The Milwaukee police try to save face, and the victim's family share their stories. So this episode focuses mainly on Jeffrey Dahmer's dad. He's basically at a state where he's starting to blame himself for the behaviors of his son. Then his new wife is basically saying, you can't just go around beating yourself up. You can't blame yourself for what your son did, because you may have shown him how to do certain things like when he was a kid, but how would you have known he was going to go and carry that over into adulthood and commit the acts in which he did? And in a way, she had a point. You never know what your son is going to do. And that goes back to what the Crimson Cure posted. How do you deal when you find out your kid is a monster? How do you live with that? How do you go through life knowing that your child, someone you helped bring into this world, is doing what they're doing? How do you cope with that? Then this also goes back to where his mother is pregnant with him. They're going to see therapists. She's still taking the pills. She's still, smoking, drinking, all of that while she's pregnant with him. This is all a few months before he's born. Because I think Jeff was born in 1960, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was born in 1960, if I'm not mistaken. Someone can put it in the chat for me if I got the years wrong. So, he's also now sitting with an attorney inside of the jail, because at this time Jeffrey's already been arrested. He's already in jail. So now he's sitting with the attorney, and they're trying to convince him to plead insanity. But Jeff is like, I don't want to plead insanity because I'm well aware of my actions. I was very sane when I did what I did. And his dad and the attorney was like, oh my God, can you please just plead insanity and maybe go to an institution? He's like, I don't want to go to an institution. It's almost like Jeff had accepted his fate. Whatever fate was going to come his way, he accepted it. And he has come to grips with the terms that what he did was not him being crazy. He was very much in his own head of what he did. Mega Old School said May 1960. Okay, so he was born in 1960. Hopefully he's a Gemini, because I was born in May and I'm a Taurus. But he was basically at that point, but he was content with not taking the insanity plea. He was willing to accept that if he was going to go to jail for the rest of his life, he most definitely, that's what was going to happen. So the lawyer and his dad could not convince him. It wasn't going to work. They tried and whatnot. So what ends up happening is they end up going to court. And that's when the judge tells him that, the trial is going to proceed. You will not be eligible to plead insanity. So if you are found guilty, you will be spending the rest of your life behind bars, which 9 times out of 10, he was always going to be found. He was going to be convicted anyway. It was no way he was going to walk from that. So now gets to the part. Hold on. Let me make sure I'm not jumping ahead. Okay, now gets to the part where the victims' families give their testimonies. So every family member gets up and starts talking. The first one I believe that spoke was the family of the Asian boy who was murdered. And I think they dealt with theirs the most, because you got to think that was a 14-year-old boy. So the dad had problems, speaking and, English. So his son had to translate for him. and everything like that. And what I loved about every testimony is not one person who got up on that stand to give their testimony said that they forgave him. They basically said everything, you SOB, right in hell, I hope you die, and all types of stuff like that. But it wasn't until the sister, it was a black woman who was the sister to one of the victims. And I knew she came in there not playing no games, because she came in there with a 100% black shirt on. She had that half hair right here and them bamboo earrings. She came in for war. She walked up. They had to like escort her out of the stand before she could even come up and get her testimony. She came up on that stand, slammed her hands on that podium, pulled one of these, looked over. She couldn't even get his name right and didn't even care that she got his name wrong. Looked over at him, started cussing him out. She ran from behind that podium like she wanted to jump across that table and do damage. I would have been like, if I was one of the guards, I'm like, oh, she slipped through my hands. She slipped through my hands. But she went off on him. If you actually look online, you can actually see that in the trial. So the way that the actress who acted that part out was spot on. Like if you put those two clips together, it's like literally identical with how both of them went off like that. They were literally like neck and neck as far as the reality versus the performance. But she snapped on like she was prepared to go across that table. But they calmed her down, and she ended up sitting back down next to her mother. And they give some more testimonies and everything like that. And then they allow Jeff to get up there and give some kind of remarks or whatever. And it really equals out to nothing. I'm surprised that they were able to keep their composure that long to actually have him stand there and address the courtroom. But actually before that, and I forgot to say this, do you know that Jeffrey's mother, the one that's always spazzing out all over the place, actually had the nerve to go to one of the victims' one of the victims' grandmother's homes and try to convince her to get on that stand and say or say something to the effect of forgiving him or something like that? That grandmother looked at his mother like, B, are you crazy? Your son brutally murdered my grandson, and you want me to get up on there and say words of speak of him in a light tone. Now, keep in mind, this is a mother who's never been in her son's life before. I guess this was her way of feeling like, of trying to, how can I put it? Ease the tension between her and her son. That wasn't going to work. You wasn't in your son's life for years. And you're gonna go and try to tell this grandmother to go up on there and try to speak words like, nah, that wasn't going to happen. When I saw that, I was like, you better get back in your car and go and drive back wherever it is you came from, because she was bugging. And that response that the grandmother gave to her was perfect in the most classiest way possible. And she's lucky that the grandmother answered the door and not the mother, who was the mother of the victim, because the mother probably would have slapped her down them steps. But yeah, like I said, his mother was crazy. Like, she was a nutcase. And for her to come up there and do that, I said that was so disrespectful. But yeah, I just had to throw that part in there. But yeah, back to the courtroom. He gives his little statement or whatever. Then the judge gives his verdict. And of course, the verdict is Jeffrey Dahmer was found guilty for all of the charges and all the murders that he was charged with. And then eventually it came back that he was convicted and sentenced to like 900 years in prison, which is the rest of his life. And then after that, it's pretty much, everyone's, happy and relieved and all those good things right there. And then all of a sudden, you got that crazy nut mother of Jeffrey Dahmer going off in the hallway of the courthouse on the father in front of his wife again. Like, this woman, Kendra, I know you're still in the chat right now, and I just need you to say yes or no. Would you say that Jeffrey's mother was a hyena? That's a question for the Crimson Cure. Would you say that Jeffrey Dahmer's mother was a hyena? Because I wholeheartedly believe she embodied every aspect of it. I mean, the nerve of her. I mean, throughout this entire series, like, she was horrible. Okay, she said a hyena of the highest order. Yeah, she's up there for sure. It's like she wanted to take no accountability whatsoever. And the one time she felt like she was being a good mother, she goes and asks the grandmother to forgive her son for what he did to her grandson. What? That's crazy. Okay. I think that covers episode 8. Now we're going to move on to episode 9. We are almost at the end, y'all. We are almost at the end. And if y'all haven't hit that like button, go ahead and do that for me right now. We have 100. Well, Restream says 182. I don't know what YouTube says. But episode 9 is entitled The Boogeyman. The synopsis for that is: Glenda, the victims, and their families do their best to move forward despite haunting memories, while Jeff attracts fanfare behind bars. So this episode is triggering in a lot of ways. It's triggering because of what the families have to go through and what people are doing on behalf of Jeffrey Dahmer. So now Jeffrey Dahmer is in jail. He has his own cell because there's no way they're going to put him in a cell with anybody else. There is no way. It's not happening. So while Jeffrey is getting letters and money, like, people are writing this man letters saying how much they love him, how much they're a big fan of his, and all types of stuff. They even went as far as to creating whole comic books. Let me repeat that. They went as far as creating whole comic books behind Jeffrey Dahmer and started to mail them to the families. Tony Hughes, his mother got a copy of the so-called comic book about Jeffrey Dahmer in the mail, where he's playing this superhero going out, quote unquote, slaying people. People are like pedestalizing him. And of course, it's, as far as I know, it's only PC that is doing this. And then I felt bad for the Asian family because they kept getting all of these threatening calls. Like the Asian family, you know, the one who was the loved ones to the 14-year-old kid, you had them calling their phone saying, go back to where you came from, calling them the G word that rhymes with the word spook. I'm not going to say it on here. They saying get on a boat and leave. You know, you can't even speak the language. You know the usual stuff that they like to try to tell the black people to say go back to Africa, but with them it was like go back to Asia and stuff like that. Like they called this house so many times, and the father answered that phone every time. They would stay on the phone for like no more than 10 seconds and then say some nasty derogatory things and then hang up. They did that so many times, all to helm up a staunch serial killer. There was even a clip in there where the police were at the station, and they hung up the phone and they were laughing. I couldn't help but wonder, were some of those cops, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of those cops were crank calling that family and saying those things. I wouldn't be surprised if they were probably calling from some unknown number, so the number couldn't be traced, and crank calling that family and saying all types of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised. They even talked about the two cops that allowed that that kid to go back to Jeffrey Dahmer. Like they had put them, they did the whole paid administrative leave thing, and they even talked to the chief like he was nothing. Because mind you, the chief I think was Latino or Mexican or something like that, so they didn't have no respect for him because he wasn't PC. They said they basically were talking to him like, well, we're gone for right now, but guess what? We'll be back. They were huffing their chest out, walking around like they had balls of steel. And sure enough, we already know what happened. We know that they never get fired. They only get transferred. But in this case, they didn't get transferred anyway. They got sent right back to that same precinct. Like it was nothing. All the PC cops was clapping for when they walked through the door. That one black cop was looking at him with disdain. Then you had the chief back there looking like, oh my God. And guess what? That still happens today. And I'm looking in the chat. Crimson Cure said, I feel like it was the cops. Black Knight discussion says they were. The Beast said that they did it too. Monica said it was the cops that were calling them. And Janelle said, I believe. Okay, so we're all on the same page. I believe it was the cops calling them because they will be the ones that have their numbers. Because it's in a database. They would have the number to call them. But they let them back in. And that's not all. They got rewarded. Those two cops got Officers of the Year. These were the same two cops that let that Asian boy go back into that apartment and get murdered by this man. And they got Officers of the Year. And they up there just clapping it up like it's this grandiose thing that you sent a 14-year-old boy back to his death. Now, they also gave Glenda some kind of an award too, like some kind of community service award or something like that. And she says that I can only accept this only on one condition, that y'all actually do better when it comes to your department. Fast forward, what has really changed? This is the same department that is responsible behind the death of George Floyd. So what really has changed? Nothing. Now, back at the apartment, they allowed the residents to move back in, but a lot of them didn't move, like stay inside of their apartments because the smell was still kind of there. So they stayed out in the hallway and they were just like conversing and all types of stuff like that because it was traumatic for everybody, for all parties involved. Then the landlord came back and told them that they couldn't stay there anymore because they were about to do something to the building. And by something, they were about to bulldoze it. They were about to tear down the building. They said that, if you decide to cut your lease, we won't charge you for cutting your lease. It was something else that they were going to, it was basically some kind of beneficial thing for them so it wouldn't hurt their pockets. But they ended up tearing down the building. In the end, they ended up tearing down the building in which they were staying at. They condemned it. They just said it had to be condemned for a multitude of reasons. One of them, because it was too bad in there. And then two, it was too traumatic. So they ended up bulldozing the building. And also, too, a lot of the families, they will have nightmares about this guy. So, yeah, I always tell people mental enslavement always hurts more than the physical. Jeffrey Dahmer left a mental imprint on these families for the rest of their lives. I'm sure to this day, they probably are still dealing with it, even though this man has been taking the eternal dirt nap since 1994. They are still going through it to this day. I'm sure the families have probably created support groups around each other because they all had to deal with the same thing from the same individual. But mentally, it's still there. It's definitely still imprinted in their mind, in their mental, for as long as they're going to live. Like, that's something that's not just going to leave you. And the thing is, when this was going on, when the trial was going on, I was still like a baby. When he got murked, I was 5. So when I started learning more stories about him, then I was, of course, much older. But yeah, this is definitely going to be something that's long lasting on all parties involved for sure. So with that being said, let's move on to the last episode. And this is the episode that I'm very sure that everybody could not wait for me to talk about. And the episode that everybody who watched this series could not wait to see and see if they were actually executed the right way. So, the last episode, episode 10, I'm going to talk about that, Miss Beautiful, at the end. Episode 10 is called God of Forgiveness, God of Vengeance. The synopsis reads, in prison, Jeff's newfound fame makes him a target. His parents seek closure, and Glenda pushes for a memorial on familiar grounds to honor the victims. Okay. So, we're back in the prison where Jeffrey is at. And when I tell you, Jeffrey has become such a nuisance to everybody in that prison. The inmates hate him. They're tired of him. Even the guards are tired of Jeffrey Dahmer. They are over him. They are over it. So it was one scene in there where they're eating. They're sitting down eating, and I think one of the things on the tray was chicken. It was a chicken leg. Jeffrey Dahmer picks up the chicken leg and compares it to a thumb. Then he dips the chicken into ketchup and compares it to blood. It begins to lick it as if he was eating blood off of a thumb, which, by the way, he probably has eaten some thumbs. So he's having like a revisionist history. So he probably has done it before. And he's literally like, he has the chicken in his hand and he's licking it, like literally sticking it up and literally making a spectacle of himself right there in the mess hall, in the area. And all the inmates are looking over him like, dude, just like shut up, like what are you doing, and all types of stuff like that. So fast forward a little bit, they are now inside of the chapel where they are. Actually, this happened in the last episode. Let me insert this part right here because I forgot to put this in the last episode. They're in the chapel and they're singing like it's a minister. They got the chapel minister there. They're singing, and he's literally on the bench by himself. Like no one ever sat with Jeffrey Dahmer. He was always by himself, either when he was eating or at the chapel, anywhere. He was always on a roll or at a table by himself, which is probably for good reason. And he's sitting there and they're singing the hymn. And I see this one black guy. It's not Christopher Scarver. It's a black bald guy. And he's sitting behind him and he's looking at him. And I'm looking at him. I'm saying, he's about to do something. So this guy takes a shank and right in Jeffrey's neck, like right here in his neck. He doesn't hit an artery. So that doesn't take him out. We know what takes him out. But he stabs right here in the neck. And then he's bleeding out, and then he has to go to the infirmary. So that's where he's at in recovery. So now let's go back. I had to insert that in there because I didn't want to leave that. I didn't want to leave the good stuff out. And yes, like Chosen One said, Jeffrey also had a knack for leaving food trays on the seat as if it was a prank or something. So when the inmate would sit and they didn't see it, they would get food on their butt. And they knew it was him because he was the only one doing it. Because Jeffrey was so immature. He was almost like a child. He was an adult with a childlike mind. It's almost like the Peter Pan effect, the kid that never grew up. So that's how he was. And they knew it was him. And they always wanted so much to put hands on Jeffrey Dahmer, but they probably felt he probably had some kind of level of protection. But he always let that fame go to his head. And in this episode right here, where we get a first glimpse of the hero of this story, none other than Christopher Scarver. When I saw that guy sitting in, I saw his hair, I said, that's Christopher Scarver. I said, that's the actor right there that's playing Christopher Scarver. Now, Christopher Scarver was, in jail. He was trying to turn his life around. Like he said, he dedicated his life to Christ. He's more in tune, with religion and everything like that. But then one day, Christopher goes to the people that keeps the records of all the inmates and why they are in there. So he goes and asks the lady, can you tell me why Dahmer is in here? Because he's walking around here like he's the big man on campus, and I need to know why. So she's not telling him anything. but she kind of directs him to like news articles. So Christopher goes and he finds all these news clippings, like these newspapers. And there is where he finds all of the stuff about Jeffrey Dahmer and why he's there. He sees, like, the cannibalistic stuff, the killings, the cutting up of the people, the acid, all of that. But the thing that triggered him the most was what he did to that 14-year-old Asian boy. That is what triggered him the most out of everything that he saw. I mean, everything he saw in there was disgusting enough. But what he saw, what he did to that Asian boy, was enough to set him off. So he reads all of that, he internalizes all of it, and it is what it is. So now they're back in the cell, and Chris is reading the Bible. He's reading the Bible. He's in the cell and he's reading the Bible, like different scriptures, while they're carrying or taking Jeffrey Dahmer to go to the pool because he's getting baptized. I guess he feels like his soul is about to be saved. I said that's why this is so ironic that this happened. Because you have Christopher Scarver reading the Bible, he says he's deep in a religion now, and now you got Jeffrey Dahmer going to get baptized. So Jeffrey Dahmer goes and he gets baptized. Whoop-de-whoop. Fast forward. I'm telling y'all, we get into the good part. Like, the good part's coming up. So after that, they have the inmates do like work. So they had Jeff on like cleaning duty. So Jeff and another inmate are inside of the weight room cleaning the exercise equipment. And one of the guards said, y'all have another person coming in that's going to help you. The guard opens the door, and it's none other than Christopher Scarver walking in. Christopher Scarver has this laser vision. He's locked in with his target. Appreciate it, songwriter. He is locked in with his target, laser focused. Almost like the T-800 looking for Sarah Connor. So he walks in the weight room. He kind of just looks like he doesn't really say anything. Then the other guy who Jeffrey's in there with goes in there. He goes into another room. Christopher Scarver follows behind him, and all of a sudden you hear the guy screaming. And then he see Christopher Scarver walk out with a broken broom handle and it's blood on the other end. If y'all did not know, and I actually remember talking about this because I did a series of videos a couple years ago, Black Heroes Month, and Christopher Scarver was in that lineup. Christopher Scarver also took out another inmate that same day of a man who murdered his wife and I think children, his wife and kids. So you can see that he had a soft spot for kids. So he killed that guy. Then he walked out, dropped the broomstick. He has a little talk with Jeffrey, about the Bible and all types of stuff like that, and about karma and all types of things like that. That was one of the few times where Jeffrey Dahmer actually was scared. Like, you could see the fear in his face. Then all of a sudden, Christopher Scarver knocked Jeffrey Dahmer to the ground, like hit him with his fist. Knocked him to the ground hard as hell. Like he knocked the glasses off of his face. Then Christopher Scarver walked over and got a weight bar. For those of you who go to the gym, they have weight bars where you can change the weight out on the bar. Is the bar that is a metal bar. You can add different weights to it, like add weight, take away weight. He got a weight bar that was like this long. He took the weight bar, stood over Jeffrey Dahmer, and just went in, whacking him. Just He was hitting him so hard you could see the blood splatter that they use for special effects splatter onto the camera. Like, you could actually see it. Like, splat. Like, I don't know how many times he hit him, but I would guess he hit him probably about 10 times. When he was done, half of Jeffrey Dahmer's face was crushed in like a soda can. They showed it for those people who are questioning if they actually show it, they show it. So, spoiler alert. And when it was over, Christopher Scarver walked out of there, and there was a big pool of blood coming out of his head. He was pretty much done. So after that, his dad gets the call. They're basically saying that you need to come down to the hospital, like right now. They don't tell him why. They just say, come to the hospital. So he and his wife go down to the hospital, and the minister, who's the minister at the prison, basically says that your son is dead. So they take him in to go see him to identify the body. They pull back the sheet, and that's where you can get a better view, it more so from here to the side, of how crushed his face was. Like Christopher Scarver went in on him, and rightfully so. So after that, there was something that was in, I guess, Jeffrey's will where he wanted to be cremated. So they ended up cremating Jeffrey Dahmer. However, they did not cremate his brain. They had took his brain out of his head to send to a lab because they wanted to study what were the triggering points of Jeffrey Dahmer. But his dad was like, that wasn't his wishes. His wishes was for him to be cremated. So isn't his brain part of his body? Like, why his brain being sent to this lab at some school to be tested? And of course, it's back to the mother because she wants to know why it is. And guess what? She probably would want to have that brain more destroyed more than anyone because it could link back to her pill popping, drug overdosing, drinking binge days. So the court ended up siding with the dad to have his brain be destroyed. They burned it. So to this day, no one will ever know what triggered Jeffrey Dahmer to do the things that he did, if any at all. So it's just going to be left up to speculation at this point. The episode pretty much ends off where Glenda Cleveland talking to this woman. They were trying to get some kind of memorial at the location where they bulldozed the apartment complex. And do you know, to this day, they never put that memorial there. They never put one there. And that was pretty much it. It ended off on that note. They ended off the episode showing the pictures of all the victims that Jeffrey killed. And that was the end of the series. Woo! We have been on here for almost 2.5 hours. I cannot believe this. Wow. I cannot believe this. That was a lot. Now you can see why I had to do this as a live stream, because to put this into a pre-recorded video, do you see how long I would have been talking? And then I like the feedback that I'm getting from the chat. That actually helped guide us over this 2 hours that I've been talking about this series. But yeah, this was a very interesting series. Miss Beautiful said, did you know Dahmer killed John Walsh's son? I did, and that's actually why he started America's Most Wanted. That is exactly why he started to. That's why he did. That's what kicked off America's Most Wanted. But it was a lot. It's a lot. Now, I did read somewhere where the that some of the families were upset with Netflix for putting this out there because they said it wasn't consent or consensual for them to do something like this. And trust and believe, I would be upset too. If I felt like they didn't come to me to talk about this and they just did it. The only thing is, this story is public knowledge and has been public knowledge for many years now. So if Netflix wasn't going to do it, someone else would have. Oh, also, they also touched on John Wayne Gacy and Ed Gein. In case y'all don't know who Ed Gein is, he is the reason why we have the movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's where the inspiration came from. Ed Gein basically did everything that they did in that movie with the exception of a chainsaw. The chainsaw was just added for dramatic effect, but everything else was pretty much spot on. Then they talked about John Wayne Gacy in there as well. So they slipped in 2 other major serial killers. And I'm thinking to myself, when I did my White History Month back in 2017, why in the world didn't I put Jeffrey Dahmer in there? I didn't put Jeffrey Dahmer in there. I should have. But you know what? I guess in a way, that's why I'm doing this. But yeah, it's a it's a lot. I couldn't even imagine having to listen to that. I remember I asked my parents, I said, y'all remember what all that stuff was going on with Jeffrey Dahmer? And they was like, yeah, that was a major story. That was a major national story at that time. Now, when you think about what Jeffrey Dahmer did, and you think of people like Ed Buck and what he did, it's a lot of parallels there. Now, I don't know if Ed Buck ate anything. As far as we know, all of their limbs were still intact when they discovered them. But it's a parallel there, and it's a story that I'm gonna be bringing to y'all hopefully this week that I actually recorded today, that almost lines up exactly with what Jeffrey Dahmer did, but they only did it with one person. I said if they were able to get away with it, who knows how many more they could have done. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the discussion, and that's the review. But I do have one question though. To those black men who are in the academy right now, what is your take on this? Because you were Jeffrey Dahmer's primary target. I'm just curious. What is their take on it? Would they even watch this? Yes, I know it's a lot to digest, but I'm just curious. Because you can't tell me that there was no racial aspect that played in this at all on his part. Between who he targeted, where he lived, who he seeked out, even with the cops, that was blatantly obvious. Like I said, even back then, it was going on. Just something to think about. And that was a guy who was in the academy, and he used his privilege to do what he wanted. He tried to act like it wasn't, but I think he knew it was. Miss Beautiful said Netflix put the LGBTQ genre, and folks got mad that it was on Dahmer. Hey, that's a part of history right there, whether they like it or not. But yeah. But that's pretty much it, y'all. Like, I have really nothing more to say. Like I said, I've been talking for like almost 2.5 hours going through this review, and uh speaking with y'all in real time about this. Like, I'm glad I was able to come here and talk about it for the last couple of hours. I'm glad y'all stayed locked in, tuned in. For those who watched it, y'all pretty much helped guide this conversation, because there may be some things I might have forgotten that I was looking in the chat and was able to get. Some of y'all are now going to watch it based on what I was talking about. And like I said, there's probably still some more stuff in there that I can't remember, but I think I hit on all the points. So if you choose to watch it, you'll be like, oh, I remember Taurean talking about this. And it's okay if you choose not to watch it, because a lot of people said they couldn't even get through it, and it's understandable. Like, when I saw that they was putting this out there, I already knew it was going to be a heavy watch. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end this stream. We'll be back on here tomorrow with the 3 videos of the day, 10, 2, and 6 Eastern Standard Time. Y'all enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Y'all be safe out there.